Scalpel. Now. The voice cracked through the emergency room like a whip. Gloves snapped, shoes squeaked on the slick floor, the smell of blood sharp in the air. Monitors screamed a flat, accusing tone. Someone shouted, "He's crashing," and panic moved through the room like fire leaping from cloth to cloth. Pressure's dropping. Damn it, we're losing him. More suction. Quickly, quickly. The patient on the table was drenched in blood, his chest a battlefield of deep red wounds. The assistant's hands shook. A nurse fumbled an instrument and it clattered to the floor, echoing through the sterile chaos. But one voice cut through the noise, steady, commanding. "Clamp. Right side. Now. Hold him steady." Her voice. Low, calm, unshaken. Dr. Doyen Okafor didn't flinch when the man's body jolted under her hand. She leaned in, sweat at her brow, eyes fixed on the wound as if nothing else in the world existed. The room tilted around her urgency. She heard the heart monitor blip weaker, slower, but her tone never cracked. "Don't let go. Do not let go. I've got him. Stay with me." The world in that moment was blood, metal, and breath. Her hand inside his wound, searching for life before it slipped away forever. Someone whispered, "He won't make it," but she silenced them with a glare sharp enough to slice. "Don't you dare write him off. Not on my table." Minutes stretched like hours. Pressure bags hissed, machines beeped, suction roared. She stitched, clamped, fought. Then, against the weight of death pressing down, a faint, stubborn rhythm flickered back to life on the monitor. 1 beat. 2 beats. Stronger. The room held its breath. And then, beep, 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 steady, insistent. "He's stabilizing," the anesthetist whispered, as if afraid the spell would break. Doyen's eyes closed for one sharp second, her shoulders trembling just enough to betray relief. But when she looked up, her voice was once again stone. "Clean the wound. Prep for transfer. He's not safe yet." Silence settled into the room, the silence that comes after a storm, heavy and thick. The assistants moved, slower now, obedient to the gravity of what had just happened. And then, just as she was peeling her gloves off, his eyes fluttered open. A flash of dark, determined eyes locked with hers. Even half-conscious, weak from blood loss, there was something unnervingly sharp in his gaze. "You," his voice rasped, raw as gravel. "You don't leave." Before she could answer, his hand, trembling, but firm, clutched her wrist. His grip was iron despite the tubes and wires tethering him. "You're mine now." The room froze. A nurse dropped her gaze. An orderly shifted awkwardly. And Doyen, standing there in her stained gown, felt a chill crawl up her spine that had nothing to do with the cold air of the emergency ward. Hello family, welcome back. Before we go any further, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, what allows voices like mine to keep telling tales that matter. Drop a comment too. Tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's continue. Hours later, in the private wing of St. Mary's International Hospital, whispers traveled faster than the Ford drip beside his bed. "That's Sao J1, someone murmured in the hallway. The heir to the Sao conglomerate. Another voice hushed them, eyes darting toward the closed door. Doyen sat in the chair by the bed, her gloves long gone, her hair tied back but streaked with stray curls that had fallen loose during surgery. She was there only because he refused to let her go. "Mr. Sao, you're stable now," she said evenly, watching the lines on the monitor dance. "You'll have a full team assigned to you. I don't need to stay." His head shifted weakly against the pillow, eyes opening once more. They were still dark, still unnervingly sharp despite his condition. "No. I want you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Professional. Always professional. That's not how this works. I'm your surgeon, not your..." His hand twitched, reaching. Not strong enough to grab her this time, but strong enough to make his point. His voice was barely a whisper now, but the words landed heavy. "You saved me. That means you belong here." And for the first time since she'd cut into his chest, since she'd fought death itself for his heartbeat, Dr. Okafor felt a different kind of weight settle in the room. Not the weight of blood or bone. The weight of something stranger, something far more dangerous. The weight of being chosen. And she didn't yet know if that was salvation, or a trap. The rain outside Seoul that night slid against the tall hospital windows like thin fingers tapping at glass. Inside, the room was quieter now, machines humming, for dripping, but the silence was not peace. It was pressure. Heavy, invisible pressure that made the air thick. Doyen stood at the end of his bed, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on him without blinking. She didn't move when he coughed, didn't flinch when he turned his face toward her, still pale, still stitched, but staring at her with the authority of a man who was never told no. "You're staying," Seo-jae-won said. Not a question. A command. "No," she answered. Not even a pause. "I'm not staying." Their voices clashed in that small room like two blades meeting in the dark. He stared at her, and she stared back, neither willing to soften. The monitor beeped between them, the only reminder that his body, no matter how powerful his name, was still fragile. "You don't tell me no," he murmured, his throat still dry. "And you don't tell me what to do," she shot back. A silence stretched. Tense. Sharp. Like a rope pulled tight enough to snap. Finally, she walked closer, reached into her bag, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She placed it firmly on the tray by his side. The edges barely rattled when she set it down, but her voice carried more steel than any machine in the room. "If I'm going to be your doctor, we set rules. Non-negotiable. No interference in my career. No spreading rumors. No ownership. You need me for medicine, you get medicine. Nothing else." His gaze shifted from her face to the paper. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his hand, weak but steady, and dragged a pen across the bottom. A signature, bold even through trembling fingers. Seo-jae-won. She hadn't expected that. Not so quickly. Not so easily. Her brows pulled together. "You didn't even read it." "I don't need to read it," he said, his voice low, almost lazy. "You wrote it. That's enough." Something twisted in her chest. Frustration, maybe. Or something dangerously close to respect. The next week blurred into a strange rhythm. By day, she was back at St. Mary's. White coat, steady voice, professional stride. Colleagues stole glances, whispered in corners. "That's her. The Nigerian surgeon. The one Seo-jae-won demanded." Nurses exchanged looks, orderlies whispered bets. The weight of eyes followed her down every corridor. By night, she was in his mansion. A place that felt too big, too polished, too quiet. She checked his wounds, adjusted his medication, kept her tone as clipped as a scalpel's edge. He tested her, always testing. Asking questions, leaning close, watching her as if he wanted to see what cracked first, her resolve or her patience. But she didn't break. Not once. "You can stare all you want," she said one night, tightening a bandage. "It doesn't change the fact that you're just another patient to me." He smirked, even through the sting. "Then why does it feel like I'm not?" Her hand froze for half a second before she pulled away. The bandage was tight. Maybe too tight. A different rhythm beat in her heart when she went home. To Mapo. To her small apartment with its peeling walls and the smell of stew simmering in her mother's old pot. Her mother, Mama Okafor, always met her with the same eyes, half proud, half worried. "Dien, this life you're living," Mama said one evening, sliding a bowl of pepper stew toward her. "Don't let anyone cage you." "I'm not caged, Mama," Doyen answered, blowing on the hot spoon. But the words didn't taste true. The rumors at St. Mary's grew louder. One morning, two nurses stood too close by the vending machine, their whispers sharp as needles. "She's not even Korean. How did she land Seo-jae-won?" Not land. Trap. Women like that, they always trap men with power. Doyen didn't respond. She just walked past, her heels clicking louder than their words. But later, in the silence of her office, her hand clenched into a fist against her desk. That evening, back at the mansion, Jae-won tried the stew Mama had sent along. He coughed. His eyes watered. His face flushed red. "You call this food?" he choked, pushing the bowl away. "You call yourself strong, she teased, unable to stop the corner of her lips from curling. He glared at her, but then, slowly, reluctantly, lifted the spoon again. He ate another bite. Then another. By the end, sweat rolled down his temples, but the bowl was empty. "You're insane," he muttered, slumping back against the cushions. "And you're stubborn," she replied. And for the first time since that bloody night in the emergency room, her laughter filled his mansion. But the laughter didn't last. The next morning, as she stepped out of the hospital, the sun just rising over Seoul's towers, a shadow detached itself from the street corner. A man. Lean, sharp smile, dark eyes she hadn't seen in years. "Hello, Den," Raphael said softly, blocking her path. Her breath froze in her chest. "If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Leave a comment, tell us where you're listening from, we love hearing your voices." "Hello, Den." The voice came smooth, too smooth. A voice that slid under the skin and stayed there. She froze, her breath tight in her throat. Morning air chilled her lungs, but her palms burned hot. Raphael. He stood in front of her, leaning on the wall as if he owned the street. Slim suit, polished shoes, the same cruel curl of lips she remembered. Years had passed, but the look in his eyes hadn't changed. It was the same look that once broke her, the same look that once whispered lies she almost believed. "What do you want?" Her words were flat, controlled. Too controlled. "What I've always wanted," he said, tilting his head. "You." She clenched her jaw, forcing her legs to move, to step past him. But his hand shot out, blocking her path without touching her. His arm hovered just close enough to make her stop. "Walk away, Raphael," she warned. "I'm not the woman you knew." He laughed. A low, dangerous sound. "No. You're bigger now. A doctor in Seoul. Touching the untouchable. The whole hospital whispers your name. Seo-J-1's private surgeon." His smile sharpened. "You've made yourself valuable. That makes you useful." Her spine stiffened. "I'm not a tool." "Oh, but you are," he murmured, stepping closer, too close. "And if you don't play along, I'll break you the way I always could." Rumors spread fast. "I have photos. Doyen. Proof. One story from me, and they'll all believe you're nothing more than his mistress." For a second, her chest ached with the weight of old fear. But she swallowed it down. She would not give him that satisfaction. "Try it," she said, voice steady as stone. "And watch me end you." She walked away, each step heavy but firm. His laughter followed her down the street, echoing like chains she'd already broken once. By the time she reached J1's mansion that evening, her pulse was still racing. She found him in the study, papers spread across the desk, his shirt collar loose, his stitches pulling slightly when he leaned. He looked up. He saw it instantly, the tension in her shoulders, the storm in her face. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. His brow furrowed. He leaned back, studying her, his eyes dark with questions. "Someone hurt you?" "Not today," she muttered, setting down her bag. "Let me check your wound." He caught her wrist mid-motion, his grip not rough, but firm. "Tell me who." She met his eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. His intensity pressed against her like a wall. She could lie. She could bury it. But the weight of Raphael's threat still pressed on her chest. "Finally," she whispered. "My past. It found me." The next day, whispers grew louder in the hospital halls. "Did you see the prescription order? Her name's on it. Silver Crane, illegal trials, banned last year. She's finished. She'll be dismissed." Doyen walked past them with her head high, but inside her heart thundered. Someone had forged her signature. Someone was painting her as dirty. That night, she confronted J1 in his office. The tension between them snapped like wire pulled too tight. "They framed me," she said, slamming the file down. "They want me gone." "They want me weak," he corrected. "And you are my strength. So they come for you." "I won't be caged," she warned, her eyes sharp. "Then don't," he said simply. "Fight with me." The words hung in the room. Simple. Clear. Dangerous. Later that week, a plan was set. A trap. A bait file, left where greedy eyes would find it. And they did. In the cable car above the Han River, Jae-won's cousin Ginho leaned forward, whispering threats into her ear. He thought she was alone. He thought she was cornered. You'll regret stepping into his world, Ginho hissed. Silver Crane is ours. You're nothing but leverage. Say one word, and I'll bury you. Her recorder hummed quietly in her pocket, catching every word. She stared at him, calm, composed, her heart a steady drum. And for the first time, she felt not like a pawn. Not like prey. She felt like a player. But as the cable car touched down, as she stepped off into the night air, a familiar figure leaned against the shadows, clapping slowly. Raphael. Very clever, Din, he said softly. But you forget, I always hear everything. The night was thick with rain. Sheets of it slid down the tall glass windows of Seo Jae-won's mansion, thunder growling over Seoul like a warning too late to matter. Inside, the air was quieter, but tense, charged, restless. Doyen stood in the living room, arms folded, eyes fixed on the storm outside. She could still feel Raphael's voice in her ear, his words slithering like smoke. She had proof now, the recording of Ginho's betrayal. Evidence strong enough to shake the foundation of the Seo Empire. But Raphael's shadow lingered, a warning that something worse was coming. Behind her, Jae-won spoke without lifting his head from the documents on his desk. Tomorrow, the board meeting ends this war. And tonight? She asked. He finally looked up, his eyes dark, steady. Tonight, we rest. But the storm outside said otherwise. It began with a sound. A faint click. Metal against metal. The front gate. Doyen turned sharply, instinct sparking. Did you hear that? Jae-won's head tilted. His hand reached slowly toward the drawer at his side. Stay behind me. Then it hit. Glass shattered, the mansion doors burst inward, and shadows poured in. Men in black, faces masked, weapons glinting in the stormlight. The quiet of the house was devoured by chaos. Shouts. Boots. The crack of gunfire splitting the air. Down. Jae-won barked, pulling her hard behind the marble pillar as bullets ricocheted. The chandelier overhead swung wildly, its crystals clattering like panicked bells. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would drown the noise. But when she turned, Jae-won wasn't hiding. He was standing, firing back, sharp and controlled. Stay low, Din, he ordered. I'm not leaving you, she shot back, crawling to the medical kit on the shelf. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from memory. Blood, wounds, the surgery table. She could handle blood. She could handle pain. What she couldn't handle was losing him again. A sharp cry tore from his throat as a bullet grazed his side. He stumbled, but didn't fall. She ran to him, grabbed his arm, dragged him into the study as gunfire roared behind them. Sit down, damn it. She pressed her hands against his wound, the hot spill of blood rushing against her palms. Don't you dare bleed out on me again. He smirked through the pain, teeth clenched. You saved me once. You'll save me again. Shut up and breathe, she snapped, tearing open gauze with her teeth, rapping his side even as the door to the study rattled under fists. The handle twisted. The lock splintered. And then, Raphael stepped inside. No mask. No rush. Just him. Calm, smiling, walking into the storm as if he had brought it. Well, he said, clapping slowly. The doctor and her patient. How poetic. Jae-won reached for his weapon, but Raphael's men were already behind him, guns raised. Don't, Raphael said smoothly. Not tonight. Doyen stood in front of Jae-won without thinking, her arms outstretched, her body a shield. Enough, Raphael. Enough. His laugh was low, sharp. Oh, Doyen. This is only the beginning. Did you really think a recording could save you? Did you really think a scalpel could protect you from me? Her pulse thundered, but her voice didn't waver. You won't win. He stepped closer, his eyes glinting. I already have. Behind her, Jae-won's voice was a growl, deep and dangerous. Touch her, and I swear. You'll what? Raphael cut in, smiling wider. Bleed on me. For a moment, silence filled the study. Thunder cracked outside, lightning flashing through the rain-streaked glass, illuminating the three of them caught in a web of power, history, and blood. And then, another sound. A distant wail. Sirens. Police. Too close. Too fast. Raphael's smile flickered, just slightly. His men shifted uneasily. You called them, he hissed. No, J1 said coldly, pushing himself upright despite the blood soaking his side. She did. Raphael turned sharply to Doyen. Her chin lifted, her breath steady. Yes, she said softly. I did. His eyes burned with fury. He raised his gun. And the door behind him burst open. The study door exploded inward with a crash that shook the walls. Shouts filled the hall, heavy boots pounding against marble, gun barrels flashing in the stormlight. Raphael spun, eyes wide, teeth bared. No, this is my night. But J1 was already moving. Despite the blood staining his shirt, despite the wound that dragged him down, he pushed himself up with the strength of rage and survival. He slammed his shoulder into Raphael, driving him back against the bookshelf. Books crashed to the floor, leather and paper spilling like broken history. The gun fired, once, twice, the sound tearing through the air like thunder inside their bones. Splinters ripped from the desk. Glass shattered across the rug. Doyen dropped low, her ears ringing, the taste of iron thick on her tongue. J1, she screamed, scrambling toward him, hands clutching at the bandage already soaking through with red. I'm fine, he shouted back, teeth clenched, pressing forward anyway, fists meeting Raphael's face with brutal force. The two men crashed into the chandelier's light, a brutal dance of blood and fury. Raphael clawed, kicked, his gun hand thrashing wildly. J1 held him, slammed him against the pillar, snarling with every strike. But Raphael was fast. Too fast. He twisted, shoved, ripped free, and aimed straight at Doyen. Time slowed. Her breath caught. The barrel stared at her like an eye of death. And then, J1 stepped in front of her. The shot rang out. His body jerked. No. Her scream ripped through the storm as she caught him, pulling him down, blood warm against her palms. The world tilted, blurred. She pressed her hands against the wound, her heart beating louder than the sirens now screaming outside. But J1 wasn't done. Not yet. His hand closed over hers, steadying her trembling fingers. His other hand reached for the fallen gun between them. With a roar, he twisted, firing once. Twice. Raphael staggered back, shock flashing across his face. The man who thought he owned her, who thought he could break her, crumpled against the desk. Blood bloomed across his chest like a cruel flower. The storm outside crashed louder, lightning splitting the sky as Raphael fell. And then, the mansion filled with police. Armed officers poured in, shouting commands, sweeping through the shattered halls. Raphael's men dropped their weapons, dragged down, pinned to the ground. Dien clung to J1, her hand still pressing hard against his side. His eyes fluttered, lips curling into the faintest of smiles. You didn't leave, he whispered, his voice raw. Don't you dare thank me, she snapped, tears streaking her face. Don't you dare close your eyes. His smile widened, weak but unbroken. You're mine now, but not because I said so. Because you stayed. She pressed her forehead against his, the storm's thunder fading into the hum of sirens and shouts. Her body shook with relief, with rage, with love all tangled into one. By dawn, the storm had broken. The sky above Seoul glowed pale, washed clean. The Seo board met hours later. Ginho's betrayal was exposed in front of every shareholder, his voice caught in crisp recordings that left no doubt. He was dragged from the hall in disgrace, his empire dreams reduced to ashes. At the hospital, Doyen stood before the board of directors, her hand steady as she laid out the forged prescriptions, the proof of her innocence. The same whispers that once condemned her now filled with awe. She walked out not shamed, but respected. And that night, as the city lights flickered across the Han River, she sat beside J1, his hand warm in hers, his bandages fresh. You walked into my storm, he said softly, his eyes fixed on her. And you survived. She squeezed his hand tighter, her voice firm. We survived. He leaned closer, breath warm against her ear. Then we weather it together. And for the first time in a long time, Dian let herself believe that storms could end, and sometimes they left the air clearer than before. Hello family, if you stayed with this story to the very end, thank you. Please subscribe, like, and share. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, what allows us to keep telling tales of love, survival, and strength. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and join the family. Until the next story.